Hello again, friends. It's been about, I don't know, 6-7 months since I topped with this, and I figured it was probably about time for me to do a deck profile. This is my Madew Bro deck. It features Stardrive Dragon and focuses on spamming Madew to get a ridiculous amount of card advantage. To start off with, our deck list has the starter, Shining Knight Millius. Millius' effect is Generation Break 1, Counterblast 1. Put this unit into your soul. If you do, search your deck for a grade 2 unit and call it to rearguard circle. This is extremely important because we have a lot of grade 2s that we need to make this deck function, especially Knight of Twin Sword. Moving on, we have 4 5k vanilla heal triggers and 12 5k vanilla critical triggers. Them being 5k is extremely important for Knight of Fragment to be able to hit 16k with. Having a 4k trigger would actually be very detrimental for this deck, and we don't control what we call when we call with Gigantech Charger, but when anything that we call will make numbers with anything that we have, it makes it a whole lot more practical. We have 3 Light Element Peeker for our grade 1s. Peeker's effect is, during your opponent's turn, if you have Generation Break 1, give your 10,000 or less power Vanguard 1,000 bonus power during your opponent's turn. So essentially what this card does is it makes Stardrive Dragon an 11k vanilla during your opponent's turn so that he has extra defense. If you have Gigantech Charger out, it'll make him 10,000 power. If you have 2 of these out, it will actually make Gigantech Charger a total of 11,000 defense, which is hilarious. This card doesn't do too much else, and that's why we only run 3 of them. We have 3 Laurel Knight Cicilus. This card can be pitched to Stride. When we do pitch Cicilus, it ends up giving us the capacity to get back a grade 3 with Madew. So we can trade him in to get a Gigantech Charger, and then use Gigantech Charger to get another unit. We of course have 4 Rainbow Guardians. Rainbow Guardian is what I prefer to use over the other types of null guards, just because it can protect your rear guards. The importance of that isn't so much for most matchups, but if you are fighting something like Dragonic Overlord the X, then it can be useful. And our deck barely counterblasts at all, so it doesn't really matter if we have the unflip or not. And rounding out our grade 1s, we have 4 Air Element Fuwarlun. Fuwarlun is a card that gets 1,000 power for each Cray Elemental that's face up in your G zone. The longer and longer the game goes, the more and more likely this is to make magic numbers and push the game towards its end. This card actually was MVP for me a lot of games when I was playing in Chicago, because a lot of the games in Chicago ended up going to turn 8, turn 9, where I actually ran out of Madew and then used Blizza, and then this card just became a ridiculous 13k static booster. That's pretty nuts. Going to our grade 2s, we have 1 Earth Element Pokkul. Pokkul is a little bit different of a tech choice. If you have a face-up Cray Elemental in your G-Zone, then you can unflip one of your rear guards by Soul Blasting 1. We don't have anything else that uses our Soul, so this is perfectly fine for our deck. I may up this to 2, maybe even 3 at some point in time if Link Joker becomes hyper meta, but right now it's just a tech choice that I can call when I need it. This card wasn't actually out during the Chicago Regional Tournament, so this was not actually in my deck at the time, and I just had another copy of the next card I'm going to show. Right now I'm running 2 Transmigration Knight Brede. Brede is just a 12k attacker for Generation Break 1. I honestly didn't have a better unit to put in here, and I think that there may have been a better choice, but right now I don't really have the cards for that. So this is honestly just what I ran and what I'm going to continue to run because it put in work for me. It has the capacity to make bonus power with Fuwarlun 1 turn earlier than Knight of Fragment, and it gives me more effective copies of Knight of Fragment since I'm not actually running Knight of Fragment for its on-hit skill. We of course have 4 Knight of Fragments. Knight of Fragment gets 2,000 power if you have another grade 2 out. We typically call him directly from deck with Knight of Twin Sword. And he also has an ability where if he hits a Vanguard, I can Soul Charge 1 and unflip 1 damage. The on-hit Soul Charge and unflip don't really matter too much, but the fact that this card is an 11k attacker and he hits magic numbers with every single card in my deck that can boost is absolutely insane. Moving on, we have Knight of Twin Sword, which of course allows us to search our deck for any grade 2 unit and call it, unless it's another copy of himself. So we'll typically search out Knight of Black Mantle. If we need to unlock, we can search out Pokkul. If we need more power, we can search out Brede. Other than that, this card is typically used to grab Knight of Fragment. But it's extremely versatile, and this is essentially the only thing in our deck that we're going to be spending our counterblasts on, unless we want to make a big Samuel play. For our grade 3s, we have 4 Gigantech Charger. Gigantech Charger's effect is, when this unit is called to rearguard circle, reveal the top card of your deck. If that card is a Royal Paladin, you may superior call it. Now, every Cray Elemental is all clans, so that means that every single card in my deck is, of course, a Royal Paladin. So whenever I reveal the top card of my deck, I get to call it to rearguard circle immediately. That makes this card an extremely useful +1, and because of Madew, whenever it gets sent to the drop zone, we can then bring it back to our hand and use its on-call effect again. Rounding out our grade 3s, we of course have the beastly beast of all beasts, Stardrive Dragon. Stardrive Dragon has an incredible effect that says, if you can read it, it's in the fine text. You probably can't read it because this is not focusing at all. Make your opponent extremely salty when you beat them. Yep, that's his effect. For our G-Zone, we of course have 4 Rain Element Madew. Madew's effect is, when you stride this card, then you may choose a grade 3 in your drop zone and add it to your hand. We abuse the ever-living crap out of this by getting a free stride every single turn, and then calling Gigantech Charger to get another free card. This is a +2, where it would normally be a +0, and it costs 0 counterblast, so you can use your counterblast for whatever else that you wish. We have any other Cray Elemental, it doesn't really matter what the other Cray Elemental is, and Blizza. Blizza's effect is, counterblast 1, flip up another unit in your G-Zone. For every single face-up Cray Elemental in your G-Zone, this unit gets 5,000 power. Now, we're probably only going to use this card when we want to push for game, so we'll have a minimum of 3 Madews face-up in our G-Zone when we're going to use this card. So, after this card uses its flip effect, we're probably going to be sitting at a pretty 44,000 power. And that's not counting a 7k boost, bringing us up to 51,000 power. So that's a pretty big swing. And the MVP of Royal Paladins in their G-Zone, the card that pretty much everyone can run a 1 of in Royal Paladin and get away with it, is Samuel. Samuel's effect is Counterblast 2. If your field is full, your opponent does a damage check. That's pretty good. It can be used to close out games, and the only real time where you're not going to have a full field is if you have a locked unit, which is why Pokkul is now in this deck. I actually didn't have Samuel when I was doing the Chicago Regional Tournaments this year. I was caught completely unaware because when I was making the deck for the tournament, I didn't know I was going to make it because I literally purchased the cards to build it at the stall as the tournament signups were finishing. So I had to rush to get my list together and I just didn't have one of these. All in all, this card does a lot of work, unless you're fighting Link Joker. Rounding out, we have 1 Gablade. I don't really care that much for Gablade. If there was a good Royal Paladin G-Zone unit that didn't require a flip, I would be running that, but since I don't really think any of those fit the bill, I'm running Gablade for now. He's just on hit, call a grade 2 or higher unit. He can be used to get a Gigantech Charger out of your deck, and then get another unit for free off the top of your deck, potentially enabling up to 2 more attacks. So, a typical formation for this deck, I'm going to kind of move things out of the way here. A typical formation for this deck is going to have 1 Knight of Twin Sword, any amount of boosters, we'll just say 2 Peekers and a Fuwarlun. Oof. A Stardrive Dragon, and we'll just say there's a Gigantech Charger in our drop zone. So, Gigantech Charger in the drop zone. So, we're going to, well, we'll discard the Gigantech Charger to stride. Let's just say that this is on the top of our deck, actually, because I'm totally doing this ad-lib. So, we stride, we bring Gigantech Charger back, call Gigantech Charger, reveal top card of our deck, superior call that, and now we have a full field all of a sudden out of nowhere. If our opponent has a 9k defense unit on the side, we'll just say they have that, then what we can do is we can attack with Gigantech Charger into their 9k defense unit. They'll either guard it or it goes away, and then we will attack with our Vanguard. We'll get a triple drive out of that, and Fuwarlun will make this a ridiculously high number. So, get our free drive checks, whatever. Heal, heal, heal. Pass power here or to the booster here. If they're at 5 damage, it's typically best to spread them out, so 1 here, 1 here. And then attack with Knight of Twin Sword for 21k. Counterblast 1, pretend that we have damage. So Counterblast 1, search your deck for a Knight of Fragment, call it over Gigantech Charger, so that's now in your drop zone, ready to be grabbed next turn if you have a Stardrive or Cicilus to discard for it. And now you have two 21k swings after having already sniped a rear guard with Gigantech Charger and gotten 2 free cards off of it. So that's pretty much how the deck is meant to work. There are some other plays that you can do. You can use the starter to grab Poker to unlock, and then use that to go into Samuel to push for damage against Link Joker. You can just discard to stride. If you have a full field, and if your opponent's not playing the board control game, then you essentially just stride for free every single turn, and you just enjoy free cards. And then you can use your null guards without any real fear because you'll always have stride fodder. The deck is extremely solid in terms of card advantage and in terms of what it actually accomplishes. And I think the best part of all is just that you have a ridiculously tanky 10k vanilla Vanguard with all of these free cards just spewing out of everywhere. If this wasn't a Royal Paladin deck, I don't think it would do as well. There are other decks that have Gigantech Charger clones, like Violent Vesper in Mega Colony and Bob Carr in Shadow Paladin. But those decks don't actually have what it takes to really make that card good. Because I'm going to be honest, Samuel is an incredibly good killing card. And Knight of Twin Sword is probably the best overall Knight of Twin Sword clone. As in any unit that needs a boost to trigger its Generation Break effect. That's about it for this deck list. I hope that you liked it. And I apologize again for getting this out so late. Have a good one.